Lots of droughts coming across the United States, which could really impact our food supply. Well, here's what they won't teach you in school. And everybody's always concerned about snowpack. Well, let me tell you how snowpack actually works. Anywhere in the West, snowpack, what they mean is the mountains get snow. And it stays there, and it melts and goes down the river. The river goes to the ocean. That's the end, okay? So in that system, snowpack does absolutely zero good for you unless you're using that water for irrigation or you're diverting that water to a city. When you have snow melt in the spring, when it warms up, you have a loss of snowpack, and that raises the river, which means you have excess water in the river. And the new philosophy of environmentalism means don't restrict the water flow, right? So you just let it flow all the way to the ocean as fast as possible. All that excess water that you could store. Now, the way to store water is to put it in the ground. Now, we used to do this. We used to do this all the time. All the farmers across the entire West and probably Midwest used flood irrigation. So they take the water, the excess water out of the river and put it in ditches, and then they would flood certain sections. They flood this section and that section and this section and that section. Now, they told us that is so inefficient. So you have to stop doing that. We have to put it through something called a pivot, which then lightly sprinkles it on the ground and is more efficient. Well, let me tell you what efficiency does. When we actually did that, the flood irrigation, water seeped into the ground and raised up the water table. The water table is where your wells take water from. So all the water that's pumped out of the ground comes from the water table. When you're losing that water from flood irrigation over and over and over again, over years and years and years, it's seeping down through the ground, meaning you're storing it for later here. You're storing fresh water here instead of letting it flow to the ocean immediately. So let me remind you that the snowpack only lasts usually until it melts off. Oddly enough. And then the river drops and you don't have enough water in the river for everybody to get what they need. That's what the problems are downstream. But we don't anymore. For the last 15 years, we don't store it in the ground using flood irrigation. We have gone to a more efficient system, which is pivots. Now, I'm not against pivots. They do what they're supposed to do. What they do is they sprinkle it on the ground. Very little work because you just turn them on. They just go around in a circle and they water your crop. But they're only designed to wet the top 3 inches of the ground. So the plants use everything they can. A lot of it evaporates because it's thrown in the air in really hot weather. So you lose evaporation and to the plants. So that's a purpose for the water, but you're not storing any of it for later. Nothing. You're using or losing all of it. So what we have done, and then now that, the new style environmentalist means you can't stop the water even with a dam. You need to take out the dams. Humans are bad, so we got to take out the dams. So you lose electricity production. You lose more water going to the ocean, right? We don't store it in the ground anymore with this inefficient system that we used to have that took the excess water that goes to the ocean and stored it in the ground so we could use it. And then you end up with disasters like Idaho is dealing with, where we have tons of pivots, almost no flood irrigation, the water table drops, the river drops, and then, oh shoot, the city doesn't have any water. And we can't figure out where it went. Why are we losing? It's all climate change. It's all climate change. So where do I get all my information from? Well, just look around the world now. You can still see this happening. When you watch Expedition Unknown, right? And he's going to somewhere and digging up some gravesite over in Egypt, but they can't get to it because the water level has risen over, so it's flooded. Why is it flooded? Because they use flood irrigation for a long time, which has now raised the water table above that tomb. When you look at Saudi Arabia over in the old city of Babylon, I've watched a really good video on that from a guy who does Expedition Bible on YouTube. And one of the things he couldn't really show us was the step pyramid there, because it was surrounded by water, because it had flooded. The water table had risen so much that now you can't access that. Same thing over in Europe, Greece, places like that. There's a lot of things that the water table is so high, they can't access the archaeology. That's because of agriculture. They're storing the water in the ground. Now, when you switch to all sprinklers and you take out the dams, everything flows to the ocean, it's gone. You didn't use it, you just wasted it. You put it back in the ocean, but I thought that was, one of the biggest concerns already, is that we're raising the ocean's gonna flood everything. So why would we want to do that? So why is this happening now? Why did humans cause it? Well, there was an animal in the West that actually did this work naturally, and that was the beaver. There's a couple million beavers in the West right now, but back in the day when the trappers came up here, when you read all the journals and everything, there had to be vastly more beavers. Some people estimate it to be like 400 million beavers. Now, what beavers do is they slow down the water. They dam the creek, which floods it, which stores water in the ground. They dam the creek, which water goes down through the bottom of the creek because now it's not moving. They dam up parts of the river. They move water around. They flood areas. They push the water out of its channel and slow it down, put it in the soil to hold it. That's what we did after the beaver was gone with flood irrigation. But now in the West, that we can't do that. That's inefficient. It's wasting water. We would rather have it go directly down to the ocean and not use it for anything and then wonder why we don't have any water left. I'm Trinity Vandenaker. If you want to hear more of my ideas, all of my concepts, and how the takeover of the West is really happening through the environmental system, you can go to highlonesomesociety.com right now. highlonesomesociety.com. This is just common sense, right? It's just common sense. I hate to say that because a lot of people, common sense can mean a lot of different things. This is logical. What I just said is logical. I'm sorry, that's just the way it works. It's the way water works. It's the way soil works. It doesn't take a brainiac to figure this out.